Hey guys, in this video, we shall build a sign-up application using React.js for the front end, Node.js and Express.js for the back end, and MongoDB for the database. So without talking much, let's go straight to business. So I have my VS Code opened already. If you don't have one, go to code.visualstudio.com to get one for free. So let's go back to our VS Code. I would pull up my terminal. I would cd to my desktop where I'm going to create the folder I would use for this project. And in my desktop, I would create a folder by saying mkdir with the name of the folder. So the name of our folder will be called send. So when I hit enter, the folder has been created. Come here in VS Code, click file, select open folder, scroll down till you find send, then select folder to open the folder in your VS Code. So I have the folder opened in VS Code. So the first thing we are going to do is to create React app. Like I said earlier, we are going to use React.js for the front end. So I'll close that. I would pull up my terminal. In the send directory, as you can see right here, I am in the send directory. So I would say npx create React app, then the name of the app. So I'd call this sign up front, the front end for our sign up application. You can call it whatever you want to call it. Then I would hit enter for my React app to be created. Okay, so I have my React app created for me, and I have the folder here, sign up front. Here is all the React files here. So I would cd into sign up front. I would say cd sign up front, and inside the sign up front folder, which is my React folder, I'm going to create a folder that all my backend files are going to stay in. So I would create a folder inside the sign up front folder. Take note, I'm going to say mkdir sign up backend, and I'm going to cd into that folder, the sign up backend. I want to create the back end of this application first before I build the front end of the application. So that's why I had to cd into the sign up backend folder. Now let's open this up. So while we are inside the sign up backend folder, the first thing I'm going to do is to create a package.json file. So I'd say npm init. And when I hit enter, it's going to ask me if I want to keep the name as sign up backend. I'd say yes. I'll hit enter. Description, I'd say sign up application. You can keep that empty if you want, and I'd hit enter. My entry point, I'd change this to server.js. You can keep yours as index.js. I'd hit enter. Test command, hit enter. The author, I would say Joseph Brendan. I would hit enter, and that's all. Our package.json file has been created. So if I click on the package.json file, you'd see we have all the details that we entered. Sign up backend, sign up application as our description. The main file now is server.js, and our author is Joseph Brendan. So the next thing I'm going to do is to install the packages we are going to need to build our backend. So the first package that we shall be needing is Express. So I would say npm install Express. Another package will be NodeMon. So I'll add that to the list. I would say NodeMon. Just give a space after Express. You can add another package. So I would also need Mongoose, and I'd need .env. I'd also need cores. So let's install 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's install these 5 packages for now. So let's hit enter to install these 5 packages. So while the package is installing, let's create our main file, server.js. Make sure it is created inside the sign up backend folder. Now in our server.js file, we are going to import express. While it's installing, we are going to say const express equal to require express. And we are going to initialize express in the app variable by saying const app express and with the bracket in front of it. So let's come down here and let's say app.listen, and let's listen on port 4000 because our React app is going to run on port 3000 by default. So let's create a callback function here that's going to console.log server is up and running. Let's save that. So let's go to our package.json file and let's use nodemon here. Let's change test to start and let's get rid of everything here. And let's say nodemon server.js. This means nodemon will always run the server.js file. Let's save the changes in the package.json file and let's close that. So let's run our server using nodemon. I would say npm run start. And as you can see, nodemon is active. So the next thing we are going to do here is we are going to create a folder called routes. In this folder, we are going to have a file called routes.js. This file will be responsible for routing the request that comes to our server. So in this file, we are going to import express and we are going to have a router out of express. I'm going to say express.router and we are going to say router.post because this is a sign-up application. So all we are expecting is a post request because a sign-up application will only have a sign-up form. And when users fill a sign-up form and click on sign up or submit, it means the users have sent a post request. So we are going to handle that post request using this route that we are about to create in route.js. So router.post will have a bracket in front of post. The first argument will be the path where the users will make the request on. So the next argument will be a callback function that's going to take two arguments, request and response. And for now, let's just send something basic. So let's say response.send and let's just say send. After that, we have to export router and let's say module.export is equal to router. So that's that for now. So the next thing we are going to do is we are going to create a schema, and creating a schema is easy because we are going to use a MongoDB library called Mongoose to do that. So Mongoose is a MongoDB library that makes working with MongoDB very easy. So I would create a folder inside the sign up backend folder. Always make sure you are inside the sign up backend folder. So I would create a folder. I would call that models. Now inside the models folder, I'm going to create a file where I would have my schema. I would call this sign up models.js. So right inside this file, I would import Mongoose. And I would use Mongoose to create the schema. So I would say const sign up template is equal to new mongoose.schema, and I would pass in curly brackets inside the brackets there. So since I am trying to create a schema for the application, at this point you'd ask yourself, what are the details you want to collect from the users when they want to sign up to your application? So in this case, I would ask them to enter their full name, and the full name is going to be a data type of string. and I'll make that required also. I'll set required to true. And I also want them to create a username, and I'll make the data type to be a string data type, and I'll make that field required. I'll set that to true. And also I would want them to enter their emails so we can do some verification if we want to, or send them newsletters if we want to. So I would set the data type to strings also, and I'll set the required field to true, and I would ask them to enter a password, and this is also going to have a data type of string, and set the required to true. So there is one more field I would like you to always pass in, and that's the date field. Of course, this is not going to be displayed on the front end. This will be accessible only at the back end. So you want a date record for every time a user is signed up to your application. So in the date field here, we are going to pass in a function, and this function will be triggered anytime a new user signs up to your application. So we are going to set the type here to date, and that's a function, and we are going to say default date.now. Now let's save that. So let's export the schema that we have created, because that's all for creating a schema. So let's say module.export mongoose.model. The model function, which is in the mongoose library, is going to take 2 arguments, and the first argument will be the name of our table. We are going to see how this works later on. So let's call this my table, and the second argument will be the name of the schema that we have created. In this case, it's sign up templates. So we are going to say sign up templates. Now let's save that. Now let's go to our route.js file, and let's import this schema that we have created. So here in route.js, I'm going to say const sign up template copy. That's pretty long. Is equal to require. Okay, I would need double dots there, and models, sign up models. Now in our post function here, let's get rid of this response.send. Let's create a variable called signed up user. Let's say signed up user, and let's set that to an instance of the sign up template copy, which is now our schema. So let's say new sign up template copy. Now let me explain what we have here. When a user is on / sign up path, which means when a user is on the sign up page and the user enters every data they need to enter in the sign up form, when they click send or sign up, a post request has been made. Now the post request is going to come to this server, and router.post will handle it. Now when router.post handles it, it means this post function here will run. Now when the post function runs, everything inside the post function will also run. Now const signed up user is inside the post function, so this is also going to run. Now when this runs, it's going to create a new instance of a sign up template copy, which is our schema. So this means it's going to create a new schema. So we are going to fill up the value space in the schema with whatever username or whatever full name or whatever email the user enters on the sign up form. And that's easy. So we are going to say full name, set that to request.body.full name. And what this actually means is this: when a new schema has been created, now let's look at our schema. What do we have in our schema? We have full name, username, email, and password. When a new schema is created, you would have something like this. You have something like this: full name, with nothing in front of it. Password with nothing in front of it. So now when a new schema is created in our route.js file here, in this block of code, we are going to say for the full name field, grab the full name that the user has entered from the body of the request, which simply means grab the full name that that user entered on the form and place it here in front of full name. Now full name has a value. Now we are going to do the same thing for username. We are going to say for the username field, grab the username that the user enters in the body of the request. Now, which request are we talking about? We are talking about the request that the user made, which is a post request. So grab the username that is in the body of that post request. And like I said earlier, a post request is made when the user clicks on sign up. So we are going to do the same for email. We are going to say request.body.email, and we are going to do the same for password. We are going to say request.body.password. We are not going to pass in the date field because, like I said earlier on, the date field is a function. It's going to be triggered when a user is created. So we don't need to pass that in because there is no sign up form in the world where a user has to enter the date and time they are signing up to an application. So after collecting all this data from the user, we need to save it. So we are going to say signed up user, not sign up template copy, signed up user dot save. And why I am saying signed up user is because this variable signed up user now stores everything that's here. So we are going to use .then here to say .then data, if everything is successful, send a response.json with the data. And if there is an error, catch the error and send it as a JSON file also. So send the error if there's an error. Now let's save that. So for now, we are done with our routes.js file. And also we are done with our sign up models.js file. So let's go back to our server.js file. Now in our server.js file, we are going to connect our application to a MongoDB database. And that's pretty easy. So what we are going to do is this. We are going to go over to MongoDB. So if you don't have an account with MongoDB, you can create one. This is absolutely free. So you can create one. When you sign up, then you log in. I'll be logging in with my own details. So when you sign up and you log in, you'll be brought to this page here, or you may be taken to a page that will ask you to create a new cluster. Go ahead, create a new project or a new cluster. When you are done, you would find yourself here. So let's click on all clusters here. Now, when we click on all clusters, you'd have your clusters come up. I have a /project 0, which you may likely have, and I have a project called /customer, which I created myself. Now, I would click on cluster 0 here. You may go ahead to click on cluster 0 in your /project 0, but I'll be clicking on cluster 0 here. When you click on cluster 0, it's going to bring you here. Now, the first item I'll talk about is the network access. Click on network access. When you click on network access, make sure your IP address is 0.0.0.0/0. If it's not like that, click on add IP address. When you click on add IP address, you would see an option that says allow connection from any IP address or allow connection from anywhere. Click on that option and you'd have 0.0.0.0/0. Now, when you do that, you wait for 2 minutes for your changes to be deployed to your cluster. And after that, we are done with network access. Now let's move over to database access. Now, when you click on database access, most likely you would have only one admin user right here. Now, I would advise you to go ahead, create a new database user. Click on add new database user right here. When you click on that option, let's pass in one here. Let's say Nigerian as the username, Nigerian as the password. Click on show to make sure what you have in mind is what you entered. Now click on hide to hide that again. Now click on add user to add this user to your database. Now when you do that, you would wait for 2 to 3 minutes depending on the strength of your internet connection for the changes to be deployed to your cluster. Now after that, click on clusters here. When you click on clusters, you would notice this moving line around the cluster. You would wait for that line to stop moving. When it stops moving, it means your changes have been deployed successfully to your cluster. Okay, so after your changes have been deployed successfully to your cluster, come here, click on connect. When you click on connect your application. When you click on connect your application, just click on copy to copy this link that we have here. So when you click on copy, let's go back to our VS Code. In our server.js, to connect our application to MongoDB, we are going to use Mongoose. So first things first, let's import Mongoose here in our server.js. Let's say Mongoose. Now we are going to use the connect function in the Mongoose library to do the connection. So we are going to say mongoose.connect, and connect being a function will have the bracket in front of it. So at this stage, we are to pass in the line of code that we copied from MongoDB, but that will not be the good thing to do because it means we are going to type in our username and our password here in server.js. So there is a better way to do that, and we are going to use a package called .env to do this in a safe way. So let's import .env, and if you have not installed the .env package, go ahead to do that. We did that initially when we started. Just say npm install .env. So let's say .env is equal to require .env. So let's activate the .env package by saying .env.config, and that's that. So the connect function here will take our credentials, but the credentials will not be typed in here as plain text. So come over here in your sign up backend folder, create a new file called .env. Now in the .env file, let's create a variable and let's call that database underscore access. You can call it whatever you want to call it actually. Now let's pass in what we copied from MongoDB. Now we are going to do some changes here. What we have here as username will be taken off. We are going to type in Nigerian or whatever you entered. And the password, we are going to type in Nigerian also. Now we have one more change to make here that says DB name. Now DB name will be the name of our table that we created in our schema, which in this case is my table. So I'll copy that, go to the .env file, and I'll take that out and I'll paste my table. Take note, when editing this file, do not keep the greater than or the less than sign. So let's save that. Now let's go to our server.js file. Let's use the .env package to access this database access that has our credentials. So we are going to say process.env database underscore access. And the second argument here will be a callback function that's going to console.log database connected, just to let us know that, hey, our database has been connected successfully. So let's run that. Now let's see what is being said in our terminal. So in our terminal here, we have this database connected. This means our database has been successfully connected to our application. So that's very nice. Currently, our route.js file is in no way connected to our server.js file. So our server.js file is not aware that our route.js file exists. And the reason why our server.js file needs to be aware that the route.js file exists is because our server.js file is where the listening happens. This is literally our server. So when a user sends a request to our application, it gets to this file first. Then the server.js sends that request to our route.js file that has the router.post route, which processes that post request and sends back a response. So if you come here in the route.js file, you'd notice that we have a request argument and a response argument. So this route will receive a post request and send a response. But this will not be possible except it is connected to our server.js file, which listens for any request that comes to our application. So when it listens for a request and it sees a request, it's going to send that request to route.js. Now we are only hoping to get a post request because this is a sign up application. So when that post request is sent by the user, it gets to server.js first. Server.js then sends it to route.js, and in our route.js we have a post route that will handle the post request. As simple as that. So that's why there is need for our server.js to be aware that there is a file called route.js. Now route.js, which will create the user, needs to be aware of a schema. So that's why we had to create and import a schema for our route.js to use it in the post route. So if you can notice the connection, you would see that every file is connected to every file to make sense. So we are going to import our route.js file by saying const route URLs, and we are going to set that to require, we are going to say routes /routes. Now in our server.js file, we are going to initialize our routes as a middleware, and we are going to say app.use, and the first argument will be our base path. So that will be the first argument. You can call these whatever you want to call it. Some people call this /API /anything, but in this video I'm just sticking to /app. Now the second argument will be the route URLs that we have imported. So we are going to say route URLs, and we are going to save that. So what this means is this: route URLs, which is our route.js files, will be appended to this base path. So if we have another route here in our route.js file that says router.get, for example, that says router.get, and we pass in another path that says /sign-in, for example, it's this /sign-in will always be appended to /app. So for a user to get to /sign-in, the URL is going to look like www.mywebsite.com/app/sign-in. If the user is on the sign up page, it's going to be /app/sign up. So whatever is in route URLs will be appended to this base path, which is /app. So let's get rid of this line of code there. Let's save that. Now let's go back to our server.js. In our server.js file here, we still need to pass in a body parser to help pass our incoming and outgoing request. So to do that is very easy. We are going to initialize that as a middleware also. We are going to say app.use. We are going to say app.use express.json, not exports, express.json, and we are going to invoke JSON like so with brackets in front of it. So with this line of code, we have activated body parser in our application. So one last package we are going to initialize as a middleware in our application will be cores. And I'm going to say const cores. I had already installed cores as a package. If you have not installed cores, just say npm install cores and it's going to be installed. Now I would import cores like so. Cores. And all I'm going to do is initialize cores. And to do that, I'll do that under express.json. So I would say app.use and I would pass in cores just like that. And that's all. So one thing I want to point out so that you don't encounter an error is this. Make sure every line of code is arranged like this. Make sure your body parser is on top cores and your URLs. So for now, this is all we have for the back end of our application. We are done with our server.js file. We are done with our routes.js file. And we are done with our schema. Let's test our backend. And to test our backend, we are going to use REST clients. You can use Postman. Postman is a famous application for this. Postman is spelled like this. Postman. Or you can also use Postwoman. There is Postwoman and there is Postman. Any one of it is very effective. So in this case, we are going to use REST client because it's gender neutral. So REST client can be installed in your VS Code as an extension. So if you don't have REST client, come over here to view, click on extensions. If you click on extensions, in the search bar there, search for REST client. Now click on REST client there and click on install. And in some minutes, you'd have REST client installed in your VS Code as an extension. So to work with REST client, we are going to create a file in the sign up backend folder, and let's call that test.http. In the test.http file, we are going to mimic the front end of the application for now. This is before we create the front end. So let's mimic the front end of the application. And what does the front end of the application do? The front end of the application collects data and sends a post request to the server with the data that is being collected. So we are going to say post, which means this will be a post request. And we are going to set the endpoint that the post request will be sent to. So in this case, we are going to say HTTP localhost. We are trying to send this post request to localhost port 4000 /app and /signup, which is in our routes.js file. So we are going to come here and let's edit this to /app /signup. Now let's change the port here to port 4000. Now let's save that. Right under this, make sure you don't give a space like this. Right under this line, say content type and set that to application /JSON. Now you can give a space. Now we are going to mimic the form. Now what are the fields in the form? We have full name. Okay, this is a JSON file. Make sure the keys are wrapped in quotes. Now let's say full name. Let's set our full name to Joseph. Now let's say username Let's set this to Joey. Let's say email. Let's set this to joe@mail.com, and our password will be set to Josie. Now let's save that. Now let's send this to this endpoint, which is our server, and let's see if our server will send this to MongoDB, which is our database. So to do that, click on send request right there. As you can see, this has been sent to MongoDB. This has been created. We have a HTTP response of 200, which means this request is okay. So before we go to our MongoDB, I want to mention that when you type in full name here, let it be the exact spelling of how full name is being spelled here. Same for username, email, and password. And let the spelling here be what you have here also. Let these spellings be exact. So let's go to our MongoDB to see what we have. So here in our MongoDB, click on collections. When you click on collections, you wait for it to refresh. So as you can see, I have this that says my table. I have the table here created in MongoDB, my table. Now when I click on my table, you see I have my data right here being sent to MongoDB. It says full name Joseph, username Joey, email joey@mail.com, and my password Josie. As you can see, an ID is generated automatically for this object, and the date also is generated automatically. So that's that. Now we have successfully created our backend, and our backend is working very well. So let's go over to create a front end with React. Let's close all of this. Now let's collapse the sign up backend folder so that we can have good space there. Now in our sign up front folder, we have an SRC folder that has all our React stuff in it. So in our SRC folder, we are going to delete app.css, literally everything apart from index.js. So let's delete that. Let's go to the public folder. In the index.html file, let's change the title of our application to sign up application. Now in our SRC folder, where we have the index.js file, we have all of this. I'm going to clean everything in the file, so we start on a clean slate for everybody to follow properly. So in our index.js file in the SRC folder, that's in the sign up front folder, which is our React app, we are going to import React, and we are going to import React DOM. Now we are going to say React DOM.render, and right here we are going to pass in a component called app, and we are going to say document.getElementById. So we are going to grab the element that has the ID of root. So here we are grabbing the element that has the ID of root, and that element is in the public folder in the index.html file. This is the div right here that has the ID of roots, and if you notice, this div is right here in the body tag. So let's import our app components before creating it. Let's say import app from app. Now let's create our app components in the SRC folder. Take note, in the SRC folder, let's say app.jsx. Now in our app components, let's import React and components because we are trying to create a class-based component. So let's call these app. Now let's take out state there, and let's bring up another terminal for our front end application. Click on plus there, cd to sign up front. Now sign up front is where we have our React application. So right here in our return statement, let's pass in a div right there. And in this div, we are going to build our sign up form. So we are going to use Bootstrap in building a sign up form. That means there is need for us to install Bootstrap. I would say npm install Bootstrap. Hit enter. While Bootstrap is installing, let's create state. So let's say constructor. Let's pass in a super function there. Let's say this.state. Now state will hold all the fields that we need on a sign up form. You can add additional fields, maybe to check for errors or something, but here we are going to pass in all the fields that we need on our sign up form. And all the fields we need on our sign up form was actually created in our schema. We designed that with our schema. So the first is full name. Make sure they are spelled the same way you've been spelling them. Full name, and for now, full name will be set to nothing. Username also set to nothing because it's an empty form. So email set to nothing. And password set to nothing. And that's that. So in our div tag here, we are going to create our form. So since our Bootstrap has been installed, let's import Bootstrap here. Let's say import Bootstrap /dist/css/ bootstrap.min.css. Now let's save that. Now let's go to our JSX, which is the return statement here. Now let's create a container div. Let's say div class name. Now everything class in Bootstrap will be replaced with class name because this is not HTML, this is JSX. So class name is equal to container. In the container div, we are going to create another div, and let's give this a custom class name of form div. Let's say form div. Now let's close that. Now here we are going to create a form proper with the form tag, and in our form tag we are going to have our first input field. Now the type of this input will be set to text. We are going to have a placeholder full name. After that, we are going to have an onChange event listener that will listen for changes, and we are going to set this to a method that we are going to create. Let's call this method this.changeFullName. Let's call that this.changeFullName. And after that, we are going to have the value attributes, which will actually attach this input field to a value here in state. Now the value field will be this.state.fullName. And finally, I'm going to pass in some Bootstrap class, like 2 Bootstrap classes, to handle this input field. So it's going to be class name set to form control and form group. I think form group works. Okay, now that's that. We are done with this input field. So we are done with the input field for full name. Now let's move over. Let's bring this down. Let's create an input field for username. So let's say input, and let's set the type to text. And let's set the placeholder to username. Let's say username. Let's set the onChange event listener to a method that we are going to call this.change username. And let's set the value of this field. So let's say value set to this.state.username. And let's set some Bootstrap class. Let's just copy this because it's still going to be the same class. So let's paste that. Now let's close that. And that's that for the username field. Now let's create another input field. I think we can copy and paste this. Let's fix this. So the next field will be our email field. Now let's set the placeholder to email, and let's set our onChange event listener to a method change email. Actually, the name of these methods are not fixed. You can call them whatever you want to call them. Now in our value attribute, let's set this to this.state.email, and let's leave the class name as it is. Now let's fix this. After the email field, we have the password field. Now let's set the type here to password, and let's change the placeholder to password, and the name of our method for the onChange event listener will be change password. Now the state property that will be attached to this input field will be this.state.password. And that's that for our input fields in our form. So still in our form, let's create a button. So let's create a submit button. Let's say input. Let's set the type to submit, and let's set a class name of btn. Let's say btn danger, and let's say btn block. Let's say btn block. I think, okay, and let's pass in a value. Now the value will be set to submit, and that's that. So let's spin up our React server to see what we have. But before we do that, let's create all these methods that we passed in our onChange event listener. So we are going to do that outside the constructor method and outside the render method. So right here, we are going to say change full name. That will take an event argument, and we are going to set states. This.setState. So we are going to, and full name will be set to event.target.value. And we are going to have the same thing for the rest of the methods. So let's copy this, and we have change username that will change the value of username that's in states. So we are going to come out here, and we are going to paste this. After username, we have change email, and that's actually going to set states for the email field. And after the email field, we have the password field. So it's change password, and this is going to change the value of the password field. So for those of us who are new to this, what these methods actually do is this. So set state is a React function that actually changes the value of what we have in state. So I'm using the set state function to change the value of full name. And how is that happening? Now, if somebody goes to the input field for full name and starts typing in their full name, the onChange event listener here, which looks out for any change in the field, will be triggered. Now, when it is triggered, it's going to trigger this method, which is change full name. So what change full name will do is this. What this method will do is this. So it's going to take the value of that event that's happening, and it's going to save that value to full name. And remember, that value is grabbed from the event that happened in the full name field. And what is the event? The event is an onChange event. And what's an onChange event? An onChange event is simply when the state or when the value of anything changes. Currently, the value of full name and everything in states is empty. So when it changes, it means someone has typed in, let's say, B. It means this value has changed from nothing to B. And this method here will grab whatever value that makes the state to be changed, and it's going to store it in front of full name. The same thing happens for username, email, and password. So that's that. So now that we have this, let's run our server. Let's say npm start, and let's see if we have any errors at all. So let's go to our browser and let's check localhost port 3000. Let's say localhost port 3000. And you see we have this form right here. So this is not actually looking good. We can create a CSS file to make this look better. But for now, let's work on the functionality of the application. So now, if a user enters their full name, let's say John, you see, we have an error. And we have this error because we did not bind these methods to a constructor method. So all these methods that we created here, we have to bind them. So to bind is very easy. Let's say this.change full name is equal to this.change full name dot bind, and it's going to take this right there. So let's duplicate that. Let's say this.change email will be set to this.change email dot bind. Now let's go for this.change username set to this.change username dot bind. And finally, let's say this.change password. Let's bind this.change password. So let's run a server again. Our server is running. Let's go back to the browser. Let's type something. Let's say if my username is John, if my full name is John, my username is John3, my email is john@mail.com, and my password is whatever I type in. If I click on submit, nothing is actually happening. So, but what we want is this. We want the details to be submitted to our database in MongoDB. Now, we are going to do that only when we connect our front end to our back end. And we are going to do that with a package known as Axios. Just say npm install Axios. Now, while Axios is installing, let's come to our form here, to our form tag. Let's set an onSubmit event handler to a method called onSubmit. You can call this whatever you want to call it actually. This method here, onSubmit, can be called whatever. The most important is this event handler's name, onSubmit. This is default, but this here can be called onCollect, on anything, or just collect, or just submit. Now we are going to create this method outside the render method here. We are going to say onSubmit. Now this is going to take an argument called event. Now inside the onSubmit method, we are going to say event.prevent default. So we are going to say event.prevent default. So prevent default, not prevent. Prevent default. Event.prevent default prevents the form to act in a default way. The default way forms act are when you submit a form, the whole application or the whole page refreshes. But we don't want that for this form, because most times when the application becomes complex, when a user signs up on an application, the user is redirected to the home page or to their profile page. So that's what we want for a standard sign up application. We don't want the form to behave the way forms behave by default. So that's the use for this. We are preventing the default behavior of a form. So after that, we are going to create a variable, and we are going to call this registered, and we are going to set it to an object. Now, what properties do we pass in this object? We are going to pass full name, and we are going to set this to this.state.fullname, and we are going to do that for username also, this.state.username, and we are going to do that for email, which will be this.state.email, and finally for our password, which will be this.state.password. Now we are going to save that. Now I would explain what these actually does, but before that, let's import our Axios because the installation has been completed. So we are going to come here and say import Axios from Axios. Now let's save that. Now we are going to go back to the onSubmit method and I'll explain what we have here. When a user meets the sign-up form, the user will meet the sign-up form with empty fields. Now, when the user starts typing their full name and usernames in the empty fields, the onChange event will be triggered. Now, when the onChange event is triggered, it's going to trigger these methods: the change password, change email, change username, and change full name. It's going to trigger those methods. Now, those methods will change the value of full name, username, email, and password in states. Now, while all this is happening, the user has not even clicked sign up yet. The user is still typing. So whatever the user starts typing on the front end will be saved in states. So when the user finally clicks submit, the onSubmit event will be triggered. This onSubmit event will go and gather all the values that the user has entered. The value of the full name, which is of course now stored in full name. The value of username, which is of course now stored in username, because remember the user was typing it in and onChange was grabbing whatever the user was typing and saving it in front of full name, username, email, and password. So the onSubmit event will grab all those details and save it in registered. So now everything that the user has typed in the form will be saved in registered when the user clicks on sign up. So now that it is saved in register, what do we do with it? We are going to send registered to the back end, because sending register to the back end means sending all the details that the user has typed in on the front end to the back end. So how do we do that? We do that using Axios, the package we just installed. So we are going to say axios.post. Now this is a post request, remember, because we are trying to send to the server. Axios.post. Now, what's the address of the server? Currently, the address of our server is on localhost. So let's go check that. Let's check our test.http file. This is the address of our server. That's the endpoint that we are trying to send everything that is stored in register to. So we are going to pass it inside the axios.post brackets. So we are going to paste that and wrap it in quotes. Don't forget to wrap it in quotes. So we are going to wrap that in quotes and we are going to pass in comma there, and the next argument will be registered. So registered stores all of this data. So what this line of code means is this: post registered, which holds all of this data, to this endpoint, which is our backend. So if everything that is stored in registered is sent to this endpoint, which is our backend, the backend will also now send it to MongoDB, which is our database. As simple as that. So after this, we are going to say .then. Then we will take a function, an arrow function called response, and we are going to console.log our data, response.data. Now let's save that. Now, after this has been sent to the back end, what do we want to do with the front end? Let's return our sign up form back to the front end, because for now, that's all we have. Now, if we had a profile page to go to or a home page to go to, we are going to say window.location and we are going to set that to maybe /home. But in this case, we don't have any page. So we are going to say this.setState will pass in full name set to nothing, username set to nothing, which is how our state was initially, email set to nothing, and password set to nothing. So let's save that. So for now, we are done with our React front end. Now we have to test this to see if everything is working very well. So let's go to our terminal here, run our server. Let's say npm start. Now let's see if we are going to have any error. Our server is running. Let's refresh this page. Everything is working fine. So let's enter a full name. Let's set this to Newton James. Let's set the password to James234. Let's set the email to nigeria@nigeria.com. Now let's set the password to whatever we want to set it to. Now let's make sure the backend server is running. Remember, I created a new terminal here. Now I have two terminals in my VS Code. This is the first one, the backend server. It is running. Now this is the second one for our React application, which is the front end. So the both servers are running. Now let's click on submit to see if we are going to have these in our MongoDB. Let's say submit. We have an error. Okay, it says cannot read property state of undefined. Okay, that's for our onSubmit event. We are supposed to bind these onSubmit events to our constructor. So let's take this there. Let's say this.onSubmit is equal to this.onSubmit.bind. Now let's pass in this there. Now let's go back to our front end. Let's set this to Edem, and the username, let's say Edem456. The email, let's say edem@mail.com, and our password, whatever we type in. Now let's click on submit. Go to MongoDB and let's refresh our MongoDB. And if you scroll down, you would see we have this. We have full name Edem, username Edem456, email edem@mail.com, and our password, the gibberish that I entered, and our date initialized for us. So we have successfully created a front-end application using React, and we have created a back-end using Node.js and Express, and we have successfully connected it, and we have passed data from our front end to our back end and to our database using MongoDB. Now, before I come to the end of this tutorial, I want to point out something. Our password here is being sent to the database in plain text, and this is not safe. This is not how it's supposed to be done. Our password is confidential, so it's supposed to be encrypted in our database. So to do that is pretty easy. We are going to come to the back end of the application in route.js, and let's pull up the terminal for our back end. Now in our back end, we are going to install a package called bcrypt, npm install bcrypt. Now, if the package is done installing, we are going to import the package here in route.js because we are trying to encrypt our password here in route.js. So to import that is very easy. We are going to say const bcrypt, and we are going to say require bcrypt, and that's that. So before our signed up user variable here, we are going to salt the password first. We are going to salt, when I say salt, I mean SALT. we are going to salt the password first. So let's create a variable for salting a password. Let's call that salt password. Let's use a sync and a wait. So I'm going to pass in a sync here, and right here I'm going to say a wait because this may take some time to be accomplished. I would say a wait bcrypt dot generate salt, gen salt. So I'll generate the salt by 10. This is some sort of cryptography stuff. So I would say bcrypt dot generate salt by 10. Then I would come down here, I would create another variable. I'll call this secure password, and I would use await again because it's going to take some time. I would say bcrypt dot hash. Now I'm going to hash the password this time. This first line here is me generating a salt for the password because I'm going to hash and salt the password to make it more secure. So here I'm going to hash the password. I'm going to say hash bcrypt.hash. Now, what do I want to hash? I want to hash the password, and the password will be gotten from the body of the request that the user sends. So I would say request.body.password. Now, this means I have hashed the password that the user has sent. Now, after hashing the password, I'm going to salt it. And salting the password at this stage is very easy because I have generated a salt already. So I'm going to say salt password. So this means salt the password that has been hashed. So over here in signed up user, I'm going to take this out and I'm going to pass in secure password. Now, the secure password is what will be saved and sent to our database. So let's spin up our server once more. npm run start. Let's go back to our front end. Let's say Moses. Let's say Moses 238 or 239. Let's say Moses at maze.com. Or let's type in something definite. Let's say definite as a password. Now let's click on submit to see what's going to happen. This has been sent to the database. Now let's go to MongoDB. Let's refresh our MongoDB to see what we have. Now, as you can see, we have this in our MongoDB. If you take note, this password is in plain text. That's the second entry that we made. The first password, Josie, is in plain text. That's the first entry that we made. Now, if you notice, this is the most recent entry that we made. The full name is Moses. The username is Moses239. And for the password, I entered definite as the password. But you can see we have gibberish right here. So this is the best way to send password to a database. So that's that for this tutorial. We have been able to get a clear insight on how to connect our Node.js and our Express server to a React front end and have them pass data to a MongoDB database. So for now, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to share.